Hi, Iveth. I'm Ashley. It's nice to work with you or meet you. I also chose number one as my first one. That one really was the most frustrating to me because I think that, like you said, the principal singled those students out based on their physical and health appearance, whether or not they were obese. And I think the most frustrating part in that scenario was that he wanted the counselor to figure out what was causing their obesity and to fix it. And like you talked about in your video, I also said the same thing. Like, we aren't aware of the socioeconomic status of these families, and we don't have control over that, nor should we try to control that. So I think that I really I can relate to you in that sense in your response. Um, and I think with singling those kids out, this is not like an academic or behavior or emotional concern that these kids are presenting. You know, like you said, if they were presented signs of low self-esteem or poor self-image, you could definitely work with them in that capacity. But just because they don't have they're obese. That's not, I don't think, a reason to pull or single these kids out and work with them in a small group. I think, like you said as well, my thoughts were the same. That would do more harm than it would support. I think it would probably embarrass them, and they would probably be identified with their peers, and that could yeah, that would just be really embarrassing and not helpful to the situation. We also don't know like what their genetics are like, right? Like, we're all made differently, and some people, I mean, I don't know. I just think about that aspect too. We have no control over that. You talked about also the parent consent and responsibility to having parent consent. Yes, like that's our, I mean, that's 101. That's what we have to do for in this case. And for him to just brush that under the table is kind of points out red flags, big red flags for me. I liked how you talked about doing like guidance sessions. I also talked about that too, classroom guidance sessions on healthy lifestyle, not just necessarily eating habits, but also exercise habits, sleep habits, just it's all encompassing. So group counseling it wouldn't be necessary for group counseling, but more just classroom or even school wide um, sessions that can address everyone in that sense and not just single these kiddos out. I do think it was a very inappropriate approach, as you said. I'm just reading over some notes here, so excuse me. Um, And then you also talked about having a conversation about with the principal about the ethics and needs, and I think that's pretty imperative. I didn't think about that in that sense. I just got a little, I think, defensive and frustrated for these kiddos and that on this scenario. But that would be something that I would do in this scenario to work with them, unless, as you said, unless there was like a self-image or self-esteem issue that came out of it. The next one that you chose was the scenario about the student who requested the counselor on Facebook, and the counselor accepted out of fear of um, ignoring the kid and making him feel bad. I think the best way for her to have handled that would just, once she had seen the request, to just have a conversation about her responsibilities as a counselor and the professional and personal relationship, having those boundaries as you discussed. Because once those boundaries are crossed, it's hard to put them back up, especially with kids. And I think what she talked about was wanting to get more info on his personal life and getting a little bit more light on that. And I think that doesn't necessarily need to happen while we have no control over what those kids do outside of school and how they act. The only thing that we can do is inform and educate them on ways to help them to grow and be successful. And managing those types of boundaries is really important. Also, in the respect of the counselor, you don't want this child or this student to, not to say that the counselor, it's bad for you to be yourself and for them to see yourself, but I think there you'll lose a little bit of respect when it comes to professionalism in that sense. And as you said, it would allow the student to see the counselor in a different perspective, and one that may not be beneficial to the counselor client relationship. And then she already did. She, like you said, she put herself in a pretty big ethical situation there that could get her into a lot of trouble and potentially lose her license. And then the last one that you chose was number 5, about the superintendent wanting to know the progress of a specific child who's been extremely aggressive. Yeah, that information shouldn't be shared. I think the best thing that could happen is the counselor. Oh wait, information that should be shared, but the counselor wasn't seeing those behaviors and didn't agree with him being expelled. I think best case scenario, the counselor should be just the advocate for that child and go to that meeting, like you said, and discussing like a general progress, but not the specific details as the principal or the superintendent asked for. Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading over my notes again. But I think that, and also talking to the student about the issue. I'm not sure how old this student is. But bringing in the child and figuring out what's going on and bringing it all together would be really helpful, especially for the kid, because the kid might not know how it's affecting his peers or the parents behind it. But like you said, I think having the counselor go to that meeting and discuss the progress within limited, with what's appropriate to say would be helpful, because that student, obviously they're going to extreme cases and having that student expelled, and that's the last thing I think we would want. You'd want to work with the kid and help the kid grow, and just expelling them, what is that going to do? It's just going to, they're not going to get any guidance on how to change those aggressive behaviors. And so we need to do that. It's our obligation to be there for them in that capacity. But I really enjoyed your video, and I look forward to continue working with you. Thanks.